This is Alfa Romeo's first fully electric vehicle, and it's called the Junior. It's a compact SUV which is built on Stellantis' platform, but of course has got Alfa Romeo's DNA written all over it. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, it's available in 3 trims. You have got the Elettrica 156, which costs roughly £32,000 to £33,000. Then you've got the Elettrica 156 Speciale, which is somewhat of a limited edition model or launch edition model, and that can be found for roughly £34,000 to £35,000. And then you have got the Elettrica 280 Veloce, which of course has got much more power and a bunch of optimizations that have been done under the hood, and that comes in at roughly £42,000. In this review, you can see how it compares to its competitors, and of course, if it's actually worth its price tag.
So to kick things off, let's talk about performance. And here, both the 156 and 280 models have got a singular motor that's planted at the front of the vehicle, delivering all the power to the front wheels only. Now, in the 156 model, you've got 115 kilowatts of power, or 156 horsepower, and 260 newton meters of torque. You have got a 0 to 62 mile an hour claim in 9 seconds and a top speed of 93.2 miles an hour. Now, in the 280 model, this goes up to 207 kilowatts of power, or 280 horsepower, and 345 newton meters of torque. 0 to 62 miles an hour in 5.9 seconds with a top speed of 124.3 miles an hour. Now, I actually had the 156 model tested using Race Logic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 3.78 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 8.65 seconds, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in 4.47 seconds. I also clocked in a peak acceleration of 0.38 Gs. Now, those times are nothing to really shout about, especially in the all-electric market, and given that there's a vehicle with an Alfa Romeo badge that's slapped on top of it. With that said, the Veloce model is a lot more responsive and has got that extra bit of grunt. And you might actually want to consider it for a few extra reasons. See here, the Veloce model has got 25mm lowered suspension, has got 380mm disc brakes at the front with a 4-piston caliper setup, which gives it increased stopping performance. It's also got the latest Torsen D mechanical limited slip differential, which according to the manufacturer is the first for a front-wheel drive electric vehicle, and it also uses a new anti-roll bar setup with a 14.6:1 steering ratio. Now, the combination of all of this actually leads to an absolutely fantastic driving experience. And in my limited amount of time with the Veloce model around a go-kart track of all places, I was actually left jaw-dropped. See, the vehicle responds extremely well, and when you're applying pressure outside of a bend, it does do an extremely good job of keeping it on the ground, rather than actually constantly slipping or indeed struggling for any sort of traction. You've got a good sort of connection with the front axle as well. Now, why was I going around a go-kart track? Well, this is how Alfa Romeo wanted to demonstrate their vehicle's capabilities, around a very tight circuit which isn't really made for a vehicle, and yet the Veloce did a tremendous job of demonstrating its capabilities. Better still, when I was as a passenger and being driven around by a professional driver, it was even better. Indeed, while it was being chucked around, it was really good to see how well the vehicle responded. Now, it's not to say that the 156 model is disappointing, but just that it's not the one that I would pick if you want the utmost sense of driver's feel and input and confidence when you're going around winding country routes, or indeed going around a track, and potentially a full-size track instead. Indeed, over here, the 156 model still does a decent job. You've got a good sort of connection with the front axle, and indeed over here, you've got minimal body roll. Now, what's not so impressive, however, be it in the Veloce, the 156 or 156 Speciale, is the overall driving comfort. See here, the suspension system is pretty basic. You've got a MacPherson setup at the front and a torsion beam setup at the rear. And the combination of this means that when you're traversing uneven terrain or going over potholes or speed bumps, it actually can be heard and felt within the cabin. And that wasn't actually overly pleasurable while I was driving on some beaten up country roads. So it's just worth considering over here that if you want the utmost driving comfort, well, the Alfa Romeo, in my opinion, isn't quite it, especially if you look at some of its competitors, even from the likes of the Stellantis group. And this is actually a little bit surprising to me because here the Alfa Romeo offers a curb weight of just 1,545 kilograms to 1,560 kilograms, and therefore it's actually pretty lightweight for a fully electric compact SUV.
Moving swiftly on, we get onto its electric range. And here it should come as no surprise to learn that there is a 54 kilowatt hour battery pack. I say that because that's the same that you'd find on other vehicles from the Stellantis group. Think of the Jeep Avenger, the Citroën EC4, the Peugeot, among a few others. Now here the manufacturer has included a heat pump as standard, which is very much appreciated for those colder climate conditions. Now, in terms of the WLTP claim, it sits at 250 miles for the Speciale and the regular entry 156. However, the Veloce drops down to 215 miles. Now, while driving the Speciale on my mixed driving conditions, I noticed a range of 190 to 210 miles, which coincidentally is actually very similar to what I achieved in other vehicles from the Stellantis group, which also house the same 54 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's neither the best in its class, nor is it the worst. And for a vehicle that is pretty nippy, or fun to drive should I say, that's actually not too bad. Now, for you to be as efficient as possible and to recoup energy back into the battery pack, there is regenerative braking, and here there is B mode, which can be accessed via the center console. You'll have to do this each time you step inside the vehicle, which does seem a little bit cumbersome, but it's almost yet again no surprise because other vehicles from the Stellantis group operate in a similar fashion. Now this means you do not have a one pedal drive, and that might come as a disappointment for certain individuals who just like lifting off the accelerator pedal and coming to a complete standstill in those inner city commutes. Now, of course, you have got the means of plugging it in, and via CCS port it will take up to 100 kilowatts of input, and therefore means that you can go from 20 to 100% in 27 minutes. There is also an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, which comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range, and here you can go from 0 to 100% in 5 hours and 45 minutes. If you were to connect over to a regular 7 kilowatt wall box, this will take 8 hours and 15 minutes, while a 3-pin input will take roughly 26.5 hours. So aside from how it's on the road, what about when it comes to its interior? Well, here I very much like what Alfa Romeo have done because it really screams Alfa Romeo everywhere you look, from the stitching work and the upholstery on the seats to what you can see towards the dashboard and even in terms of the air vents. However, the overall materials that have been used do feel a little bit cheap in comparison to what else you can find out there on the market, albeit potentially a little bit more of an expensive price tag. Now it is actually pretty practical. You have got physical buttons that are found on the steering wheel, and you've got a few shortcut buttons that are found just underneath the infotainment system. Very handy, for example, if you just want to access the climate controls or indeed just adjust the fan speed on the go. There's no need to faff around with the infotainment system. On that note, the display itself has got a 10.25 inch size and supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. However, it's worth noting over here that in the entry-level model and the Veloce, you do not have any built-in sat-nav. If you do want this, then you'll have to go for the Speciale model, so just some food for thought. Now, the infotainment system is very nice and pretty responsive, although I do find it a little bit convoluted and somewhat hard to navigate at times. For example, if you just want to go back a menu, there doesn't seem to be any obvious button, at least not from what I was aware. Now, as for the 10.25 inch driver's display, it is fully digital and somewhat customizable, and that's very much appreciated. You can also see the map view, which makes it pretty handy for just glancing down at the built-in navigation system. Again, as a reminder, in the Speciale model. It is a shame, however, that there is no head-up display, be it available as an option or indeed included in the more expensive trim levels. Now, as for the audio system, as standard, you've got a 4-speaker setup. If, however, you go for the Speciale, you'll find a 6-speaker setup. Now, you can add a 6-speaker setup in the entry-level Elettrica 156 and the Veloce for a whopping £2,200 for opting for the tech pack.
Moving on, we get onto storage, and unfortunately it's actually pretty limited. At the front you've got the glove box, and then you've got a small little area at the front of the center console, which also doubles up as a wireless charger, although you'll have to splash out £1,350 on the tech pack within the Speciale trim, or a whopping £2,200 in the others, which I do find pretty ridiculous. Nonetheless, further down you've got 2 cup holders and then a small little area that's found within the center armrest. As for the door bins, the front 2 will suffice for a 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium sized valuables, while there's pretty much no space within the door bins at the rear, and there's also no pull down armrest compartment either. Now, on the other hand, the boot capacity is actually pretty impressive. You've got 400 litres to play around with, or 1,265 litres if you drop down the seats. Therefore, it'll certainly suffice for your weekly shops or, of course, taking larger luggage. Now, it's worth noting over here that you can also purchase a front compartment as an additional option, which can be handy for your charging cables. That's a compartment that sits at the front of the vehicle. Now, in terms of the practicality at the rear, you have got 60/40 rear split folding seats, a flat loading bay, and a small little underfloor compartment as well. And then you've also got an electric tailgate that comes fitted as standard in a Speciale trim only. However, if you do want this, you can go for the Tech Pack, which will set you back a whopping £2,200 in the other trim levels. Now, aside from transporting goods, what about when it comes to seating comfort? Well, at the front, in the entry-level model, you have got 6-way controls for the driver and 4-way controls for the passenger, and they're both manual. If you want heated seats, you'll have to add an additional £310, which I do think is actually pretty disappointing. Now, in the Speciale and the Veloce trims, you have got 6-way power controls and a massage function for the driver, while the passenger has got 6-way manual controls instead. Both seats then become heated. Now, if you do want all of this included in the entry-level 156 model, you'll have to splash out an additional £2,000. Speaking about your options, if you do want a sunroof, you'll have to splash out an additional £1,200 on any of the trim levels. Now, as for headroom and legroom at the front of the cabin, it's a non-issue. However, at the rear, it's actually pretty limited, specifically when it comes to the overall legroom. Indeed, I find it to be quite a bit of a squeeze. Furthermore, it's actually disappointing to see that the footwell design is not completely flat, given it's a fully electric vehicle, and there is a nonsensical transmission tunnel, making it even more uncomfortable for someone who's sat in the rear middle seat. Now, on the other hand, as someone who's just under 6 foot, I had no issues whatsoever when it came to headroom, and therefore is actually pretty impressive for a compact SUV. Now, this actually perfectly brings me onto its exterior design. I'd be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below. Subjectively, I really do love what the automaker has achieved with the Junior. It's undeniably an Alfa Romeo from the exterior, and it stands out over some of its competitors, including its siblings from the Stellantis group. At the front, you've got that traditional grille design that feeds seamlessly with the headlights, giving it that somewhat modern flair. Then towards the side, you have got a pretty sporty look and silhouette, and this is also thanks to the fact you've got 18-inch alloys that are fitted as standard on the 156 models, with different styles available for £310, and 20-inch alloys that are fitted in the Veloce trim. And as for the rear, you've got that really nice sporty flair thanks to the integrated spoiler and the way that the tail lights come together with the boot. Truthfully, I really do love the Junior, and in my opinion is among one of the most stylish compact SUVs out there on the market, be it fully electric or not. Now, with that said, it's disappointing not to see body-coloured wheel arches, side skirts and a rear bumper, because it would have really elevated the overall design of the Junior even further and made it look a little bit classier in comparison to some of its competitors at this sort of price point. Next up, we get onto safety, and at the time of filming it's not been tested by Euro NCAP, so I can't give you any sort of crash analysis. However, I can talk about the driver assistance systems, which are actually plentiful. Indeed, as standard across the entire trim range, you have got adaptive cruise control, which does actually work a treat on the motorway by keeping you at a safe distance from the leading vehicle, and it doesn't feel jerky either. Then you've got auto emergency braking system, lane keeping assist, speed limit warning, blind spot alert, and driver attention warning. In the Speciale trim, it actually goes one step further by integrating adaptive cruise control with lane centering and traffic jam assist, which effectively gives you steering support on the motorway, which is very much appreciated, and also gives you traffic sign recognition. Now, it's worth mentioning over here that very much like other vehicles from Stellantis, it's nice that you can easily toggle off some of these features by adding them as a shortcut. And in case you're wondering why you'd want to do this, well, simply because all of them will be re-enabled every single time you power on the vehicle. And for example, if you do not want the traffic sign recognition system, or indeed, for example, the lane keeping assist to constantly bing and bong at you or indeed take over, then you can actually quickly disable it via the infotainment system. Now, to conclude, I would like to talk about parking and visibility. And here you've got a 10.8 meter turning circle, which actually makes it pretty easy to maneuver in a tight space. You've also got nice wide opening towards the side and a decent opening towards the rear. And you've also got a rear wiper that comes included. Now, at the front, however, vision is slightly obscured due to positioning of the rear view mirror. See, it's a little further down the windscreen than it should be, and as such, as someone who sits relatively high up to see over his bonnet, it means that it's actually a little bit hard to see certain corners. And the same sort of complaints were said about other vehicles from the Stellantis group, and it's very much apparent when you're comparing and contrasting it with other vehicles out there. Now, when it comes to backing up to a space, you have got rear parking sensors that come included as standard. However, a camera is only fitted as standard in the Speciale trim, which in my opinion is actually pretty ridiculous in this modern era. So if you do want it in the 156 and the Veloce trims, you have to splash out £2,200 on the Tech Pack.
So with all that in mind, it brings us on to a verdict of the Alfa Romeo Junior. And truthfully, the manufacturer has actually done a pretty good job in terms of optimizing the platform and also giving you that DNA that one might expect. The driving dynamics are certainly there. Although it's worth considering over here, it's not exactly the punchiest vehicle and it doesn't exactly have the best sort of electric range, even for its overall price tag of £33,000 to up to £42,000. Now, despite this fact, it is still a worthwhile consideration in comparison to some of the other vehicles out there on the market, including Stellantis' very own. Now, we're curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below, and if you would pick it over some of its key competitors. And if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.